afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you. We are ready to hear from our witness this afternoon. Simon would like to be referred to by his first name and for his son Daniel to be referred to by his first name. And he would like to take the oath. I wonder if that could be done now, please.
I, Simon Markovich, swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Okay.
Thank you very much, Simon. Now, you're here to speak about your experience of Daniel's treatment and care. Daniel died on the 11th of January of 2022 when he was aged just 44 years old. He died by misadventure as recorded at the inquest. You've provided a witness statement dated the 9th of January of this year, is that right?
That's correct.
Have you had an opportunity to read it recently?
I have.
And can you confirm that the contents are true and accurate?
They are.
Thank you. Now, you describe in your statement, I'm not going to ask you to look at it, but very happy to take you to it if you want to be directed to it. You describe in your statement that Daniel became involved with drugs at around the age of 11, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
And just tell us from your perspective, please, did his drug taking have any impact on his mental health?
Probably not at first, but through his time spent in prison, definitely it did.
Okay. You describe in your statement the separation between yourself and Daniel's mother, and that this also had an impact on his mental health. Can you explain, was that in his adult years it started to manifest?
Yeah, well, it was about 11 that we split up. So Daniel's mum said he's staying with me, and she took my other daughter with her. But I worked in the city, so Daniel had a key to our home. So whilst I was at work, Daniel started to mix with people that were supplying drugs, and that's when it started for him, his life in that sort of state of mind, you know.
And did Daniel have a mental health diagnosis that you became aware of?
Not then,
No.
you know, because he was just a normal, everyday boy. But things started to go wrong once I found out he was mixing with a certain amount of crowd through my neighbours, saying your son's having loud music and stuff like that on.
I think in your statement you say that around in June of 2021 you became aware of his diagnosis of emotionally unstable personality disorder, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you say in your statement he was also diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, is that correct?
Yes.
And you became aware of that later, did you?
Yeah, much later.
Do you know, can you help us at all with whether he was on any medication for his mental health?
Well, in prison, when he got released the last time, and we went to the doctors, they prescribed him certain drugs. Quetiapine was one of them, Mixapan, and some other drugs. But I'm not familiar with what them drugs actually done to Daniel. It wasn't until we found a GP that knew Daniel had mental health problems by interviewing Daniel. So that's when I actually understood through his prison life that he was a bit mentally unstable.
So you've mentioned Daniel spent some time in custody. When did you first notice a decline in his mental health? Can you help us with that?
Probably when he was in prison and being bullied and getting beaten up and getting knocks to the head, and he had a massive scar on his head, and getting released from prison and then reoffended.
Now, he first went to prison at the age of 16, is that right?
Yeah, Feltham.
And what sort of, you've described already the sort of impact that it had, but is there anything else you wanted to say about going into prison and coming out again, what sort of impact that had on his mental health?
Well, the problem with young Feltham is you get big boys in there, okay? So with Daniel, he always could look after himself in a certain way. And there was this bullying all the prisoners, trying to take all their stuff in the young offenders. And Daniel was in the cell and he had two choices, either to give him all his stuff or stand up to him. He stood up to him and the guy knocked 6 bells out of him, yeah? But from that day on, that bully never went near Daniel, and other prisoners could see that Daniel could look after himself. So that's when Daniel was first entered the prison system, called Feltham.
And can you just help us understand, please, and you touch upon this in your statement, but whenever Daniel was released back into the community, did he face any challenges or barriers to reintegrating back into the community that you observed?
Well, the answer to that is yes, because when a prisoner serves a part of his sentence, he comes out and he's got a probation officer who provides a service for his drug rehabilitation, for his rehousing, and getting back into the community. But the problem with that is he was on methadone, a substitute for his drugs. And when you're on a daily dose, everyone would go to Boots. But the problem with that is that's everyone in the community that's taken drugs. And the probation officer's not involved in my son going back mixing with that sort of clientele, if you can be honest with. So it's just a rolling on thing, you know?
And what about being able to take care of himself in the community? Is that something that Daniel struggled with?
Not early on, that come much later, you know, with all, which we'll discuss later on. But he was just reoffending, which I never understood, because his dad worked and I could provide for him, but I couldn't be involved with all these drug people.
You mentioned we'll talk about it later. Do you want to talk about it now and say what sort of impact that reintegration had on Daniel, and in particular his mental health?
Well, in the prison system, it's not run by the prison officers, it's run by the prisoners. And there's individual gangs, and Daniel was always a person that wouldn't take any rubbish. So I'd go and visit him, and every time I visited him, he smashed to pieces, his eye out here. Just face disfigured.
How often did you get to visit him?
Well, I spoke with his mum. She tried for a couple of years, but then she never saw Daniel. So I'd get a VO every 2 weeks. I could see Daniel.
That's a visiting order.
That's right.
Yes.
So he was in Chelmsford prison.
Yes.
So I was the only visitor he had. So I'd see him every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And as I lived in Billericay at the time, but I live in Basildon now, it was perfect for me because it's not too far. And I would see Daniel, and it was just like going to see your son every 2 weeks, isn't it? What happened in prison would be between him and the prisoners and the prison guards. But he was fine as a youngster going in and out of the system because he's young. He's, what's the word, not cocky, but that sort of way. When you're young...
Assured, yeah.
That's the word, probably, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about open road. You mention it in your statement. It's at paragraph 57, page 8, for anyone who's following your statement. I'm not going to ask for it to be put up if you don't need directing to it, but do you just want to tell us what your understanding of open road was and how that organisation assisted Daniel?
Yeah, so when a prisoner goes to a certain area, it's a drug rehabilitation centre. So they can see Daniel's mental health, they can see what drugs he's been on in prison, prescribed by the prison doctor, and what course going forward to get him off drugs. So they would say, right, he can take methadone at certain milligrams, and then eventually come off. So Open Road provide a wonderful service. The people there are wonderful, and hopefully he was going to come off drugs, but that wasn't the case.
So they supported Daniel?
Yes.
And do you know what other agencies or organisations Daniel was involved with?
No, because of his drug abuse, Open Road was the only one I knew, because it was in Chelmsford, and obviously he had his probation officer, and he would stay in a halfway house because that was the rules. When you serve half of your sentence, you're on tag, and you can only go out up to a certain time. I think it was about 7:30 of an evening, then he had to stay indoors. So Open Road was purely to support him in coming off drugs. So he would have a blood test, yeah, and if he'd been taking drugs, they wouldn't give him methadone, because he's not applying to the law of his probation what he's supposed to do.
So just help us understand, did Daniel identify himself as having an addiction?
Oh, definitely.
And in your experience, aside from Open Road supporting him with methadone in the way that you've described, how else was it being managed?
What, his drugs?
Yeah, and his mental health in particular, how was that being managed?
Well, the thing with his mental health is when a person has an addiction, and people say within the prison, so there's prison doctors, and they supply him drugs, which I wasn't aware of for his mental health. So I'm not aware that they're giving him mental health drugs for his care, because they could see a problem. Daniel in prison would still be the Daniel that was coming out. So his mental health, I never saw that, because there was times when he come out of prison, I'm angry. Yeah, I can't take it anymore, you know. You've got a nice home. You want nice clothes, you've got nice clothes. But I could not have any of these guys in my home. And at a young age, I got burgled twice. And the second time I said to my son, you're staying in the house till I get home from work, and then you can do what you want to do. And then I get a phone call. I was at British Petroleum, BP at the time, on a temporary contract. And he rang me up and said, we've been burgled again, Dad. So after that, that's when he went to live with his nan and granddad. And I find out later on in life, through my daughter, I shouldn't have said the name, my daughter, that was the best years of his life, because his nan and granddad, he had respect for them. And I've seen photos which I never saw before, which my daughter gave me. And I said, I can't believe how happy. And my daughter would say, she got him a bike. None of them people were allowed up there, because his granddad was a proper builder, you know. So he wouldn't allow anything like that. And for them few years, which I found out when he come out this time, and we start to get to understand and know each other again, he explained to me that and all.
roughly how old was Daniel at the time that you're describing when he was with his nan and granddad?
Between probably 17 and 20, even though you went to Feltham, yeah, you'd come back out with Nanny and Granddad.
I'd like to move on to ask you about the time that Daniel became registered with a general practitioner, with a GP, on the 9th of June of 2021. That's at paragraph 59, page 9 of your statement. Can you help us with the significance of Daniel being registered with a general practitioner at that time?
Right, so you've jumped now, let's say, 20 years. So from the 20-year period he was in and out of prison. What's important about that is Daniel was in prison when COVID happened, okay? So a lot of the prison officers went down with COVID. So there was no visits. They was in the cells 24/7. Food was brought to the cell. And the prisoners would have a shower every 2 weeks for 15 minutes. But they was allowed to phone the parents, so Daniel would phone me a lot. Now, by COVID and no visits, the prisoners cold turkey. So for people who don't understand that, no drugs was brought into the prison. So being locked up, everyone couldn't take drugs. So when my son was released, and for the first time, he said, "Dad, I've had enough. I can't do it no more." So we cuddled, and this was the process from him being released from prison, me having my son back, and me trying to find from open road to housing to his doctors. So it had a big significance.
What did he mean by "I can't do it no more"?
Right. Well, the intake of drugs, okay, the intake of beatings, the intake of, I don't know whether I can say this, prison officers being abusive physically to my son. Yeah.
So you think he meant he didn't want to have that life anymore?
That's right. So you've got to understand, there's other youngsters now coming to the prison, isn't they? Stronger, builder, who's never been to prison before, think they own the world, they can take on. And Daniel was mature then at 40, yeah? So it's a totally different level. So when Daniel went to young Feltham, he was that kid, yeah? No one's telling me what to do. Now, he's older, no drugs were taken in, so you haven't got that high, and he could understand the world, what was going on there. So that's what I mean.
So would you say around this time, him registering with the GP on the 9th of June of 21, that was a bit of a turning point for him, would you say?
Yeah, it was massive because he got released. He stayed with me in over 60 sheltered for a week. And then before he's released, the prison would say, "Right, where do you want to go?" And he said Chelmsford. So the clinic was open road for his drugs rehabilitation. And then through the help of them and various organisations, we got the doctors, okay? But the doctor could see the drugs he was on and would ask Daniel, "Well, why are you on these mental health drugs?" And Daniel said, "I've been taking them for a while because I have mental health problems in prison," but which I wasn't aware of.
Now, I'm going to come back to the GP and the actions taken by the GP in a moment, but I'd like to ask you about the 3rd of August 2021. It's described in your statement at paragraph 93, page 18, and what you describe here is Daniel being found unconscious by a member of the public. Can you remember that?
Yeah, no, that was in Chelmsford.
Can you tell us about that? What happened?
Well, this was once I knew, because Daniel was telling me, that he was, what's it called? What's the lady called? Who walked past him? An adult.
Okay. There was a member of the public
Yeah,
saw him.
So Daniel was sleeping in a sleeping bag in Chelmsford. And she walked past him and could see, like, he looked a bit funny. So he was actually unconscious. So she called the emergencies, we took him to Broomfield. And he overdosed.
Now, can you help us with whether that was an accidental or intentional?
I can't actually say whether either what it was. But the reason is because he got kicked out of chest housing. And Daniel was aware that he couldn't live with me. So he was sleeping rough for about 2 days, and he was found unconscious. So he went to Broomfield Hospital, they pumped him up, gave him an injection, and then he rang me up, and I said, Dan, I can't take it again. But it was just a blip. Just a blip.
And can you help us with whether Daniel had a mental health assessment following that admission to Broomfield Hospital?
I don't think he did. All I know is that, because we haven't mentioned Linden Centre yet.
We'll come on to that.
Okay.
I think in terms of the chronology, that happens in the October. So we're just focusing on the summer, I think, summer of 21.
Not as far as I know.
Okay, tell us about where does the Linden Centre fit in?
Well, the Linden Centre filled in is when his doctor... So imagine this time, he's got released from prison, he's completely changed. Open Road, which was his rehabilitation drug clinic, saw a complete change. They said to me, your son is totally different now to how we've seen him in previous years, yes? So that was a good sign. Because I knew he had an appointment with Open Road, and I said he hasn't got anywhere to live. Because when a prisoner serves his full sentence, the prison authorities haven't got to get him a probation officer or anything, housing, nothing. They just say, here's a ticket to the nearest station you want to go, and off you go. Okay? It's totally different when you serve half your sentence. So I said he had nowhere to live. So Open Road had a rapport with Chess Trust Housing, who then after they saw Daniel, first of all, they're analysing Daniel's behaviour and said, right, because of this interview you've had with us, and we can see totally different, we've managed to get you an appointment with Chess Trust Housing, which was wonderful for me. But he still had to go. So he goes from Open Road to Chess Housing. They have an interview with him. And it was funny, they said you might have to share a dormitory. And he said, I'm not sharing a dormitory. So remember, I'm not got any input, I'll just sit back. And the lady who's head of the trust said, see the door? If you don't want anywhere to sleep, you can sleep outside. I stood up, said to her, that's the best thing anyone's ever said to him. Put him in his place straight away, right? So after another conversation, they accepted him. So he ended up in like a motel in Stock. So Chess Housing bought the whole motel, and it was all on the ground floor. But there, he learned how to come back in the community. So they would have to sit and have a meal together, yeah? And he would have to peel the potatoes one day. It was wonderful, yes? And then I would pick him up, take him to Chelmsford. So it was a very good experience, yeah? From there, we had to get a doctors, okay? To find the doctors in the community. And then through the doctors and Essex County Council, because Daniel was on ESA support for his mental health, and then on PIP, Essex County Council found him a duty of care. Okay? So they put him in a temporary accommodation, which wasn't great, but you got a roof over your head. So he could bid for a property. So everyone in the community could see a difference in my son. And then when we finally got the doctors, and the doctor saw what drugs he was on and why he was on them, the doctor then asked for the prison to send all his reports, what drugs he was on, why he was on the drugs. And then after a while, the doctor said, right, I'm going to write to the Linden Centre, which is a mental health institute, because I think you need help.
So then, turning to the Linden Centre, at paragraph 66, page 11 of your statement, you say it was the 24th of August 2021. I'm not going to trouble you too much about being exact about dates, but you describe a time where you attended the Linden Centre.
Yes, so we had an interview.
Okay. Tell us about that, please.
So we goes on the interview. We're in a room. There's a lady present. So the lady's where you probably are. Daniel's either side, and I'm probably a bit further back. So she wants to know his story. And as a parent, I wasn't just listening to stuff, okay? So we was there for about an hour and a half, and then Daniel would open up why he was on these drugs. And in the interview, which shocked me, Daniel was saying where he's self-harmed himself and where he tried to hang himself twice in prison. Now, the prison records will show that, okay, but I wasn't aware of it. So, as a father, I'm sitting there and he takes his top off to show the lady, the nurse, and I'm sort of looking, and it's the first time my son was slashing his arms, both, and they were really deep cuts. So it's quite an ordeal for me, if I'm honest.
Of course.
But the good thing that came out of it was that the Linden Centre said to me, the father, and Daniel, we can see you've got a problem, but we won't take you on at the moment in-house. We'll form a plan to assess you in the community.
I just want to go back to this. You described it as an interview with a lady. Do you know,
Assessment.
An assessment. It was an assessment, was it? So
Yes.
far as you understood.
Yeah, an assessment.
And the lady, was she a nurse, a doctor, or a health practitioner?
I wasn't sure, but
Okay.
let's say, looking at documents, she could have been a nurse, a practitioner. I don't know.
And this was the assessment on the 18th of October, or was this the earlier one recommended by the GP?
I think this is the earlier one on the 24th of August 21,
Thank you.
at paragraph 66. I think that's...
Yeah, because we only had one assessment. That's where a few of the dates might be wrong. So we just had one assessment, was that interview with the Linden Centre.
Because at paragraph 67, let's just see if we can have that on the screen to help you. Paragraph 60, page 11 of your statement.
Right. Okay, I believe Daniel was in the
You
assessment.
say on the 12th of October 21, I believe Daniel was interviewed or assessed by EPUT. And I think when you refer to EPUT, you mean the Linden Centre, do you?
Yeah, because I don't know who EPUT are.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that later. As far as I'm concerned, it's the Linden Centre, and that's who I dealt with. I don't know who EPUT was before, and I didn't know who EPUT was till much later after he died, when the inquiry was going on.
Okay, and then I wonder if we could just go to paragraph 66 on page 11. You say on the 24th of August 2021, I recall, paragraph 66.
68 I'm on. Right, 66.
66. I
Okay.
recall attending the Linton Centre in person along with Daniel, as I couldn't get through to EPUT on their telephone line to arrange a mental health assessment for Daniel. So I just wonder whether you're able, were there two assessments or was it one, to the best of your recollection?
Right, there was one assessment where we had the interview, right? That was to say that Daniel from the Linton Centre, they said he needs help with his mental care, okay? That one is probably the assessment in the community by telephone. If that makes sense.
So there was an assessment in the community by telephone.
Yeah, so what I mean by that is they had a plan for Daniel. They would have a caseworker who would phone him up and they would assess him through being out in the community. Not an assessment like an interview where we sat down.
Okay.
So that was their programme. Does that make sense?
It does. It's just you say here that you attended the Linton Centre. So I want, does that help jog your memory at all?
No.
Okay. Not to worry. So it's possibly the hour-and-a-half assessment that you've described was either in August or October. You're not sure.
No, I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fine.
But it definitely happened.
Yes, and it was one assessment, not two.
Not two.
Okay, all right. I just wanted
But the
to
other
clarify.
assessment, what I mean by assessment was we had the interview, which they took him on, and they were assessing him in the community. So maybe the wording is slightly wrong.
Okay, but the assessment that you've described, which was an hour and a half,
Yeah.
with possibly a nurse, where Daniel disclosed self-harm, and
Yes.
that's the first time you heard about
Yes.
it. That was at the Linton Centre, or
Yes.
that
yes.
was,
Yeah.
and that was in person.
Yes,
you
yes.
were there with him.
So the doctor then wrote to the Linton Centre. We had an interview at the Linton Centre, which is the assessment, yeah, which they assessed Daniel's mental health, and they said, we will take your son on, but in the community, not in-house at the moment.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'd just like to ask you about that and whether
Okay.
you had any views about Daniel being looked after in that way in the community as opposed to as an inpatient.
Well, to be honest, it was fantastic that now he was going to get the help he needed. So I didn't find it unusual that they said we're going the community, right? I was just so happy that he was going to get the care and attention to help for his mental health.
And so did that happen?
No, I mean, unfortunately, it was a comedy of errors.
Why do you say that?
Well, the way the interview was going to be done, that he would get a caseworker who would phone Daniel. I'll go back a bit. On the interview at the Linton Centre, I said to him, if you can't get hold of my son, you have my phone number. So Daniel okayed it, because he's an adult.
But just pausing there then.
Okay.
So you'd had a discussion with them that if they couldn't get hold of Daniel, that they were to contact you.
Correct.
And was that something that Daniel consented to?
Correct.
Okay. And you provided them with your contact details?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And so I interrupted you, but that was a conversation that you had at that stage.
On the interview, yes.
Is that what happened in practice?
No. So unfortunately, Daniel was issued with a caseworker, and unfortunately, he caught COVID. Okay. So then, instead of giving Daniel another caseworker, because I don't know how the Linton Centre runs its affairs, why they didn't give Daniel another full-time caseworker, who could phone Daniel and assess him in the community regarding his mental health. So I think goes off with COVID. Someone else phones Daniel, just asks how he is, then comes back off COVID, phones my son, so that'd be 2 different phone calls. So this, and says, how you getting on? Now my son is a very polite person. He's got that mannerism, but also he's got that anger in him. He says, Daniel, it's just remembered I can't say the name. I'm going on holiday. So he's just been off with COVID. He's run my son to see how he is, and in the same sentence says, I'm going away for 2 weeks. I'll phone you when I come back. Now, the mental health team at Linden Centres could see my son has a problem. And this is what was happening, okay? So Daniel had, within a period of time, 4 different people phoning him up. Now, surely they should have done home visits, because the nurse who saw Daniel, or whatever they're called, Daniel, had she seen him then, he blew up. Because he was over-prescribing himself on prescribed drugs, okay? So, it was either the 4th or the 5th call. I'm in my car with Daniel, and another chap rings him up and says, and Daniel answers, he said, oh, it's Linden Centre, I think, Dad. So another chap rings him up, he said, I've just been asked to ring you up to see how you're going. Right. So this is the Linden Centre caring community. So I've lost my temper, okay, with this chap, and really got angry. And the chap said, look, you don't have to be like that, Mr. Markovich, Simon. You don't have to be like that. I said, I keep on asking Linden Centre to see my son, and all you're doing is getting different people to ring him up. He puts the phone down, and literally 2 minutes, 3 minutes later, the head person of the Linden Centre, a name I can't say, said, I do apologise, and I explained to her about my son bloating up. She said, I'll sort everything out, and we'll see him Monday. Okay? Unfortunately, he died that Monday. Okay?
Before we talk about that, going back to the caseworker, you say that he had a different caseworker.
Yeah, different.
Explained about the going on holiday, but just in terms of the caseworker that he was assigned to, did that keep changing? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And what was the frequency of contact that the caseworker had with Daniel?
Well,
the different caseworkers.
The problem is, it was like they were talking to him as if to say, oh, how's your weekend been? There was no professionalism in their care regarding my son. What I don't understand is the mental health care, of duty of care in the community. You can't just have various different people ringing up someone and just seeing how they're getting on in the community. You've got to have a plan to assess him, which they did say they was going to do, and through Daniel talking and behaving, they would have a plan for Daniel.
So you say that they did say they were going to do that. Can you help us with when? Is that the first assessment?
Yeah, because I took everything in, yeah? So I'm happy now he's going to be cared for. I don't know the mental health care, how they run things, what's going through their head. All I know is through his doctors who could see a problem, recommended him to the mental health care of the Linden Centre, and after that interview with them, and they were explaining his life and the drugs he took and the medicine he's on for his mental care, that they was going to have a plan for him. And it started with who was going to be his caseworker. So imagine you've just got one person who speaks to Daniel, Daniel speaks back to him, and that person would say, oh, I think we should have you in for a weekend and just assess you. But having various different people talk to him, and then Daniel explaining to me, Dad, these people just keep on ringing me. And the nasty bits which come into it was that they wrote to Daniel, because the drugs he was on is like, imagine an elephant wants to be tranquilised, you know, you see David Attenborough, yeah? They made Daniel zonk out. He was always tired to sleep. So if he didn't answer his phone, right, they sent him a letter, which I read, and it said, as you're not answering your phone, if we don't hear from you within a week, we believe you don't want any duty of care for your mental health. But they know the drugs he's on can have that effect.
Can I just ask then, in terms of your interactions with the healthcare professionals who were involved with Daniel, was there any discussion about him being as an inpatient, either voluntary or involuntarily? Was there any discussion about a Mental Health Act assessment? Is that something, that sort of language that you'd heard?
Yeah, but that was on the interview.
Right.
So, but all that was going to happen was in the community. You've got to understand that they was going to have one caseworker in charge of Daniel, and they would assess him through his mental health, whether it was necessary for him to come into the Linden Centre or to have care in the community. Okay? They had my phone number. They didn't phone Dad, which they said they would do if they couldn't get hold of my son. Essex Council Housing had my number, because Daniel, being an adult, had to give permission, yeah? So when he was being processed for housing, they said, oh, Mr. Markowitz, we've been trying to get your son. I said, oh, he's asleep at the moment. How can I help you? Okay? So all these other organisations worked for Daniel. But the most important for me, being his dad, was that he was getting mental health care, which never come forward.
And just in terms of the mental health care, in your statement at paragraph 103, page 20, we don't necessarily need to look at it. You describe brief intervention. When you're talking about the interactions with the caseworker, is that the same thing as brief intervention, or is that something different?
No, that's what they're going to do for my son. Because we've got documents which they sent to the solicitors, but a lot of it was blacked out. So I can't make sense of what, you know, so they're blacked out.
I think this is documentation that you received afterwards.
Yeah, through Hodges and the solicitors.
From EPUT during the course of the inquest, was
Yeah.
it? Okay.
No.
Before,
Oh, yes, through the afterwards.
Before we come to that, I just want to ask you around this time where Daniel had the brief intervention, the caseworker and his care was being managed in the community. Around that time, did Daniel ever express thoughts of harming himself or anything of that nature to you?
No, but I was aware he was buying prescribed drugs. That's when I got onto the Linden Centre and I knew how urgent it was. He was swelling up. I've sent you the photos, yeah.
And so you were talking about the call that happened on the Friday, I think it was, the Friday before Daniel's sad death on the Monday. And you've described how you were annoyed, angry during the course of that call. What was it that angered you?
Well, it's the first time I'm speaking at the Linden Centre, aren't I? So you imagine, if I wasn't there in the car and Daniel answered the phone if he was there, they would have said, it was a summer's day. I've been told to ring you, Daniel, where are you? Now, on the interview, if they would have seen Daniel, which the lady did, if she was in charge of Daniel and she spoke to Daniel, she said, well, look, come in with your dad, and she saw him like that, she would know automatically by her experience that something ain't right. So Open Road, his drug rehabilitation, they give him a blood test. Yeah, they take blood. So if it's got any legal drugs, he can't have methadone. It was always clean. Okay? Had the caseworker, the same one, spoke to Daniel, he would have known there was a problem. But when you've got various different people who don't know my son, and I don't know how the Linden Centre of a morning meeting, whether they say, right, you, Mr. Jones, you phone up Daniel, you phone up Peter, you phone up, and just see how they are, and they write a little thing. After I spoke to Daniel, he seemed okay, or whatever. That's not how it should be run.
So I think if I summarise what you're saying, if I may, it was the quality of the interactions and the questions that Daniel was being asked that concerned you. Is that fair?
Well, you know, I've expressed myself that there was no interaction with the Linden Centre and my son regarding his duty of care in the community. Because if there was, I believe they would have had him in at least a weekend, so Daniel would be honest what he's up to and why he's doing that.
Now, you describe in your statement in some detail, I'm not going to take you through it, the events of Monday the 11th. Not going to ask you about that, but I'd like to ask you about an interaction that you had, I think it was the day of Daniel's death, where you spoke to healthcare professionals. Can you tell us about that?
It was either the day or the day after, because I found my son dead, so we won't go into it because it's too much. I then contacted my daughter. She come with her husband, but she wouldn't come in the property. She waited outside. I'm just hysterical. But my daughter was there. Because I will talk a little bit about him. When I finally got into the property, because we had to get a locksmith, because my son just bolted the doors, okay? I put my hand through the letterbox and the heating was on. But the locksmith managed to unbolt the doors, and as I've unlocked the door and gone in, he's on the floor.
Can I just ask you to pause there for a moment?
Okay.
I just wondered whether we could, go back to the question I asked about the call that happened with the healthcare professionals, either on that day or after. I think you attended and had a discussion.
Yes.
Is there something you wanted to say about that?
Oh, yes, okay. But I'd like the inquiry to know that when a parent finds his child...
So incredibly upsetting, and it's...
It's not upsetting, it's just hysteria. You know, I felt him, and he was still warm, so I'm thinking he's alive. And then The locksmith puts the phone to my ear from the emergency services, says turn him over, trying mouth to mouth. Tried all that, and then the emergency services come and the police, and straight away they said to me, your son's dead. And I said, well, you haven't even touched my son. How do you know he's dead? But obvious through looking at him, they've had experience with that. So I got a cloth wiped on my son's face, and remember I'm hysterical. I got a pillow and I was kissing him and tears were rolling on top of him. So that's important, because when a parent loses a child under them circumstances, and after that, through the Linden Centre, which I had a lot of trouble with. So my son's passed away. The undertaker's come, police interviewing me. My son's taken away in a black bag, which is not very nice. And then I go home with my daughter. She stays with me for a while, and then when she goes, I'm just bawling. So it was either that day, I can't remember, or the next day. It could be the next day or that day. I go to the Linden Centre, right? Now, I've had this call with them the weekend. When you go to the Linden Centre, it's a secure place. So you go in one door, it's locked. Then they ask you want to see? I said, can I see Miss? Then they asked for her, and then they let me in. And I started to cry again. And she said, what's the matter? I said, what you haven't heard? She said, my son's dead. So she sits me down, and another two ladies come round, and it goes on for about 15 minutes. And she said, there didn't seem to be, they were sorry, but they're shocked. They're thinking she's going to contact me that day and Daniel's going to come in. So she suggests, because I've asked about everything about the people involved in his case and that, and she said, we'll sort this out. So that's what happened. So they wasn't aware my son was dead. They wasn't aware he overdosed. They wasn't aware that Broomfield contacted them to say, you've got a patient under your care, whether it was intentional or unintentional, has overdosed. Okay? Where's this information got to?
So what did they tell you about, what were your expectations of what would have happened on the Monday? Was it for him to be formally assessed? Yeah,
obvious. On that Friday, when she spoke to me, she said, I promise you'll be sorted out for Monday. Okay?
And what would be sorted out for the Monday?
Daniel.
But what were they going to do?
Well, I don't know. She could have said to me on that Friday, by my language and by how angry I was, bring Daniel along now. Because I believe, had he gone then and they saw him, they would have kept him in under secure 24/7. And remember, Daniel kept on going to the doctors and saying, these drugs are not working, I want you to change them. What he was on for his mental health. But the doctor said, it's not for me, you're under the Linden Centre. Only the mental health team can prescribe you different drugs.
Can I just ask, you say that Daniel was clean of illegal drugs,
yes,
and that he was overdosing on his prescribed medication.
Yeah, so when I mean...
How do you know that?
Because he told me.
Okay.
Okay. And I could see...
And you said that Open Road would not give him methadone if he were taking other...
No. Open Road would take a blood test for illegal drugs. So, you know, like coke, heroin in the blood system. In his blood system would be the prescribed mental health pills, what he's taking.
Yes.
So that would be in his body.
Yes.
No other, because they're not illicit drugs, are they? They're prescribed drugs.
And how do you know that they weren't finding anything else?
Because they wouldn't have given him methadone. Because if a person is taking methadone and he's full of coke or heroin and that, I said, well, you can't have methadone.
Okay. So you knew that from both Daniel and from...
Open Road.
Open Road, okay.
Because remember, Open Road were wonderful. They knew Daniel.
And had you been explicit with the Linden Centre when you spoke to them that Daniel was overdosing on...
No.
So you didn't tell them that?
No. Okay. Because I never had the calls to talk to the Linden Centre till that day. Okay. But I said, that's why I was talking to our solicitors, if the mental health care's got recordings, okay? Because they would see how angry and upset I was. I said, my son's got a problem. Yeah, I didn't say, well, he's over-prescribing on pregabalin or he's drugs.
Did you tell them he was bloated?
Yes. Said he's swollen.
Yeah, okay.
That was important. But I saw the difference because I got some photos of Daniel Christmas, yeah, and he was quite slimish, yeah. It was always a big lump, but it was quite slimish in the face. But I knew because Daniel would ring me up and say, Dad, you know I'm taking a bit more prescribed drugs. I said, well, I can see it in your face, Daniel. But it comes to a point, you've got to understand, in all his life, in the 20 years he was in and out of prison, I thought I'd always get a call from the prison that your son's dead, yeah? Through the violence, what was going on. But in this 6 months, it didn't come into my head once that my son would be dead. Ever. Because even though he was taking more prescribed drugs, the Linden Centre should have had him in. They would have seen that automatically by his appearance. And that's why I was so angry when they actually rang on that Friday. But I didn't say he was overprescribing drugs. I just said he's bloated, he's angry. You have to see him. You just keep on having different people ring Daniel.
I'd like to ask you next about investigations post Daniel's death. Were you told about any investigation that there would be?
Well, when I went to the Linden Centre and spoke to that lady who was in charge, she said, because I asked about where's all the records regarding who spoke to Daniel and what they actually said after they spoke to my son. You know, on that call Friday when you saw how angry I was that you just getting people to ring Daniel, she said, I'll get all the information for you, Mr. Markovich, and I'll let you know when it's all ready, etc., etc., etc. But remember, I'm hysterical still. You've got to understand, your son's dead, right? They asked how I was. I said, don't worry about how I was. You should be worrying about my son because he was under your umbrella for mental care.
And I'd like to ask you about the inquest. There was then an inquest into Daniel's death. Can you tell us about EPUT's engagement with that inquest?
Well, I want to go much before that because you've gone too far. Baroness Lampard, what's important is that after Daniel's toxicology report, they said we can give you a death certificate, but we can't actually say why your son's passed away. So you can bury your son, but going forward there'd be an inquest regarding the death of your son. In the meantime, we're waiting for the answers from, which I found out were called EPUT, because I'm still under, I didn't know who EPUT was, but I do now. And when they answered the questions, then we'd have an inquest. So they booked an inquest date, yes. There was no answers from EPUT yet, okay? So the coroner rang me up and said, we have to cancel that inquest, okay? He then booked another date, because he asked me, can you beat any dates? You know, I'm retired, I'm not working. In the meantime, I get a call from someone from EPUT. Said, so the member of the coroner there has asked EPUT to answer these questions. So they contact me on the phone and say, I'm a lady on behalf of EPUT, that you're asking specific questions about your son's care through the Linden Centre. So I said, correct. She asked me what I was asking, and obviously she was typing them out. She said, you should hear within 2-3 weeks from us. It was coming near that inquest date again, and then the same lady contacted me. She said, we sent you an email about all the questions you've asked, and we've answered. Okay. So I looked at the email. I said, they haven't answered not one question. She said, yeah, but it's the same lady, okay? So she knows how I was. So I was professional talking to her, not angry. She looks at the questions I've asked. She's looked at what she's typed and what the email reply from them was. Exact words was, they haven't answered none of your questions, have they? I said, no. The next inquest then was cancelled, okay? So we've had 2 inquests which are cancelled. I then get a call from the coroner's office who said, I've asked now EPUT to be representative at the inquest. They have to be there and they have to answer the questions. So I said, the people from the Linden Centre, I want them there, yeah, so they could answer the questions. So as far as I was concerned, on that inquest, that the people involved, from the lady who interviewed Daniel, the person who was in charge of everyone, and the caseworkers would answer, to put my mind at ease, what actually happened in the duty of care regarding my son Daniel. I then goes to the inquest. And remember, this is a year now. So I just want it to end. I just want them, do you understand? Mm-hmm. So I turn up at the inquest. They've got a solicitor. Not one person's there who I asked for, but a representative of EPUT. Okay? It starts off where the coroner said there could be a conflict of interest. So I said, what does that mean? And the coroner said, I used to work for the solicitors.
Ah, yeah, okay.
Okay? Now, I just want it's been a long year of suffering through my son's death and through EPUT making my life a misery. So I said to the coroner, no, that'll be fine. I just need to get some answers today. The lady then says to me, the coroner, Mr. Markridge, you cannot ask them when they come to stand up. You have to ask me the questions, and I then report over to them. Now, I did speak to my solicitors, but you haven't. Had Baroness Lampard, you heard the video, you know, it's recorded. You'll see how messed up it was, okay? The chap from EPOT stands up. So first the policeman who was there when Daniel died gave his evidence, and the coroner said, you can go, right? I've got no legal representative. Why have they got legal representative, right? I believe had I had legal representative, the thing on his debt wouldn't be misadventure. And I'll give you the reason. He gets up. I put the questions to the lady, the governor. She puts it, where's this person? Right? He'd only answer the questions that he wanted to answer, which was a couple of the caseworkers that spoke to Daniel and the reply, what they wrote down. So I've lost my temper, okay? I said, they've put me through a whole year of this to come to the inquest and not answer my questions. If you listen to the tape, to top it all, he sits down, and then, you know, at the end where they wanted to say about your son, commemorative stuff, their solicitor says to the coroner, I think we should put on the death certificate, so it's all on tape, what he died from. Right? The coroner's looked at me and said, will you step outside, Mr. Markovich? I'm thinking, what's going on? Right? So they're all in there, I'm outside, about 10 minutes. What's going on? They call me back in. They said, we've decided that your son has died, misadventure. Right? So the lady who does the old, you know, records it all, and it's been recorded, because I've got a tape, you know, which I go to. She could see I was broken down.
She could see you were...
Broken down,
Yeah.
like really bad. So they go, and she comes to me, and I said, what does misadventure mean? And she said it could be a number of things, okay? And then I went. And the death certificate, misadventure. And I haven't heard anything since.
Did you have a view about what that death certificate should say?
Well, if it would have said he died from an overdose, yeah, in the back of my mind, I probably would have thought it was better for me, because then the Linden Centre, I could say, you were warned through Broomfield Hospital, his doctors, and even on the interview, she wrote, Daniel...
Risk of overdose.
Risk of overdose. So they was aware of it. But because I found my son dead, and there was no illegal drugs in him, but I know he was taking more, it didn't say he had X amount of more drugs in him. It was just prescribed drugs. So he died. But why did he die?
I'd like to ask you next about recommendations, and
Right.
what recommendations would you invite the Chair to consider?
I think the most important thing is honesty from mental health care is why it takes so long not to answer any of your questions, because you're a parent and you want to know things. Secondly, we must have a solicitor with us, because what's important, I know all cases in mental health, people die or people do things, and it's not anyone's fault. Yeah, it's just what happens in life. But we must have a solicitor. If I could go back now and I'm thinking, right, they're not answering none of my questions. I've waited a year. We've had 3 cancellations of an inquest, 2 cancellations and the 3rd one. Let me take legal representative. Now, had I had legal, I believe misadventure would not be on that certificate. Because obviously my solicitor would have asked put questions, and I don't know legally, would they be allowed to answer them? I'm not sure what an actual inquest is really for if no one's going to attend and say, this is what our caseworker's done, this is what happened, we could have done this differently, we wish we would have done it differently, we don't know whether it still has an effect on whether your son died or not, I don't know. But having legal representative in my particular case would be so important.
I wonder if we could have up, please, paragraph 187 of your witness statement, page 35. Here in your statement, you list the recommendations, and I just wonder whether this might...
What page was it?
It's page 35, paragraph 186 onwards, so we can see there...
It says there are several matters that I believe...
That's okay, you don't need to,
okay,
to read it out.
sorry.
I'm just going to summarise it for you. First, contact with next of kin, and then second, continuity of care. Third, taking proper history from family members. Fourth, honesty, transparency and accountability. Fifth, the inquest process and legal representation. And finally, the impact on families. Is there anything in addition to what's in your witness statement that you wanted to say?
No, that's really important, what's there.
Those are all the questions that I have for you, Simon. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wanted to say?
This hearing is about parents trying to help other people in the future, okay? That a duty of care, that it may not happen to their children. But what I don't understand is when I went with my son to a mental health, remember, I'm not qualified in that, and we're here to say this is what they should have done, or what experience have we got with mental health? They're qualified, they go get their exams, they know by mixing with other cases, a duty of care they must provide. Is it for me to say, well, they should have done this or they should have done that? That's been going years, the mental health. It should be written in stone that this is how we handle cases. This is, if we're not sure, instead of waiting, we do this, yeah? And that's what should be happening, yeah? My experience is that, you know, I haven't broke down today, but I've cried a river, I'm telling you.
Are you all right, Simon?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any further questions for
Okay.
you, Simon. Chair, did you have any questions?
No, I don't have any more questions. I wanted to assure you that I've listened with great care to what you've had to say today. And
Thank you very
grateful
much.
to you. And if there's anything else you wanted to say that you don't feel you have said, you can always write to us and add to what you have said.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much, Simon. We're now going to take a 10-minute break to see if there are any questions for you.
Okay.
If there aren't, that concludes your evidence.
Okay.
So can I take the opportunity to thank you very much for your witness statement that you've provided to the inquiry and for giving evidence to us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your team today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Chair, if there are no questions, we return tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Malhotra, very much.